listening to Games from the Cellar, the board gaming podcast featuring authentic board game conversations. I'm Steven, your host, and tonight I was joined by John, Chris, Sam, and Ed to play Power Grid. Tell us about Power Grid, honey.
Power Grid, also known as Funkenschlag. Who would ever call a game Power Grid if you could call it Funkenschlag?
Silly Americans don't understand German names.
Anyway, as I was saying, Funkenschlag was designed by Friedemann Friese and was first published in the US by Rio Grande Games in 2004. Power Grid was a Spiel des Jahres Recommended Game in 2005 and has won many other awards. At the time of this recording, Power Grid has a 7.8 rating with 63,000 ratings on BoardGameGeek, with a ranking of 55. It is a 2 to 6 player medium complexity game that should play in about 120 to 150 minutes.
So thank you for joining us in the cellar as we spark up a conversation of Power Grid.
I think you meant to say Funkenschlag.
Funkenschlag. The time has finally come. Chris's favorite game is on the table. So I'm going to hand it over to him and let him tell everyone about Power Grid.
You know, I realized when we were playing Ingenious that I am absolutely terrible at explaining games.
This is true, but...
Chris, did you realize this was your favorite game before he said anything?
I enjoy this game a lot, but I would not say it's my favorite game. It is one that I usually excel at.
So we'll back up.
Thanks.
This is a game that we don't play because Chris always wins, and the only way for us to not let Chris win is to not play.
Or cheat.
Yeah, I remember playing very aggressively against Chris at this game in the past, and still losing somehow.
Still losing.
I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, something about this game and Chris's brain just kind of click.
Probably until today.
Right.
I mean, you think about. I was
just to
listening.
change it up.
I was listening to Nexus Ops today, and it's like Chris is always first to the monolith,
And you weren't at all.
I don't think I got up on a monolith one time.
You tried.
I tried.
And I got to be honest, I haven't played this since like 2014, 2012. So I barely have a grasp on the rules right now. So Sam, I'm going to be depending on you to help me figure out what I'm allowed to do.
I'm going through the rules now, yes.
Yeah, it's been a while for me too. I think it was back at your old house was the last time I played.
It's been that long.
Long.
I have played this since then.
And Patrick, we are pretty certain cheated to win because you were in the other room playing something else with somebody. But
yeah, I find that this game gets played a lot more without me.
Huh. That's odd. So this was like a heavy hitter in the mid 2000s. This was like ranked number 2 on BGG. It's a very cerebral game. It's very Euro. There's no dice. It's all about management of your resources. And
this is a Euro-ass Euro.
Yeah,
I believe you were the one that introduced us to Power Grid because I remember you having the rules, putting out the garbage, the oil, the wood.
Yep. I was the first one that owned it. And I think I got a second map at some point, and then. We played it a lot, and I think it just sort of, I don't want to say it fell out of favor. It's just, we moved on to other things because we had played this so much. I've got 14 or 15 games, and this is not a game you play at lunch. I mean, this is a pretty solid chunk of work that you're going to go through, and the math is not difficult, but there's plenty of it, and it's one of those games where you always feel like if you had just one more dollar, you could actually do what you want to do, so you end up having to kind of figure out how to make your decisions to make it work the way you want to. But we're looking at a big map of the United States with some of the ugliest pipes and it's nodes and edges is what it is. It's a graph. And the idea is that you're building out chunks of power to all the different cities in, they say North America, but as best I can tell, I think everything here is in the United States. So it's the United States map. And there's a distance between each. So if you've got power in Jacksonville, if you're already powering Jacksonville, you can power Birmingham, Alabama, which will cost you 9 to make the connection between Jacksonville and Birmingham. And there's a big old 9 on the edge that holds those 2 points together. And you can't both be in the same place at the same time, so everybody's vying for positions. You're trying to grab your spot. It's fun with graph paper and it's fun with the dollars because you have to have enough dollars to hook everything up, and you have to have enough power or enough dollars to buy fuel for your power plants because you're a power company, hence the name Power Grid. And then at that point, you have to have enough money to light everything up. So it's an interesting game, and I think I forget, is it the first one to 17 wins, or does it depend on how many players?
I believe it's 15.
Is it 15?
I believe it's 15. But
Okay,
it has been a little while since I
it's
played it.
been that long. So
Why does it go to 21?
Because you can build more. It's just a matter of
That's how many
can you
s-
power them all.
That's
Right.
how many cities are connected to your network.
And,
We're
and,
gonna
and
be
at the end of the
fighting for
game,
resources down
you
here.
may go shooting through 17. In fact, that's typically what happens with this game. Is everybody's kind of holding back until they're ready to make their run, and then somebody goes for it, and everybody's like, "All right, popping everything," and you do your best you can to.
So the
close it
game
out.
ends when one player has built 15 cities,
Nailed it.
but the winner is the player who can power the most cities. So just because you've built 15 cities doesn't mean you can power that many, depending on what power plant cards you have and
what fuel you have to make them work.
And it's all open player knowledge. So if you can build that 15 city, but you know you can only power 13 of them, you know what everybody else's
Yep.
power plants,
Yep.
you know what the resources
Yep.
they have.
Yep.
So you can go ahead and build that 15th knowing that you can power 13 and the other people can only power 12.
So there's two actions going on. There's grabbing places on the map, and then there's having these power plants in front of you. You can power or you can have 3 power plants at a time, and some of them run on coal, some of them run on oil, some of them run on solar and wind, garbage and nuclear. So you'll at the bottom of the card, each card for power plant number 9, 1 oil powers 1 building. Well, that's not very good, but it's great at the start of the game because it's cheap. You auction these and you get them for cheap.
Yeah, compare it to 7, which is 3 oil for 2 power.
For two cities, and that's not doing you very good. So, but as
It's a
the
little
game
more
goes
power, a
on,
little less efficiency, and that's the trade-offs you're looking at.
right, and as the game goes on, the bigger, better power plants come out. So you want to buy the better stuff. So you're constantly churning. You're auctioning to buy power plants, and then you got to buy fuel to fuel the power plants, and then you got to buy your expansion. So it's a lot of money going out. And then when all that's said and done, you get money coming in because I guess you're charging people for their electricity. So that's the long and the short of it. That's how the theme works.
Yeah. And the box does list the game it takes 2 hours. And it takes, I believe, every minute
Every
of that
minute
2
of 2
hours.
hours. Yeah, we'll be here a while. But it's a good game. I have very pleasant memories of playing this, even though it's been over a decade. And with any luck, we'll get some more pleasant memories today. So anybody got any other questions?
Yeah, so remind me, there's 2 things that you're purchasing. You're purchasing the power plants, and then
There's
each
3
of the
things that you're
cities
purchasing.
have. Yeah, okay,
3
yeah.
pieces.
So you're also purchasing the fuel, but you're purchasing the cities,
Yep.
and it's 10, 15, and 20 based on you're the
Yeah.
first, second, or third
third.
person
So
in.
if you look at the map, each node in this network has a 10, a 15, and a 20 spot, and that's how much that city costs, right? If there's 2 players here ahead of you, you have to pay 20 to add this node to your network.
But it's also something like until we get to the
stage
second
3.
or stage 3 is when that third person can buy in.
I
Yeah.
have not read anything like that in the rules so far, but
You'll
I'll
get
keep
to it.
looking.
Yeah, you're
So-
not going to be able to just all of a sudden hop into the same
So,
city.
so the third thing you have to buy is when you expand your network. So like I was saying, you could be in Jacksonville on the 10th spot in Jacksonville, and if nobody has Birmingham, you can move to there. But the edge between Birmingham and Jacksonville has a 9 on it. So you're going to pay
Yes.
9 to make that stretch as well. So
Yeah,
that's
that's-
the third thing you're going to spend money
So the
on.
really cost would be 19.
Yes.
Well, yes
some,
and no, because
some connections are better than
29.
others.
remind me, because you're only paying the 9 when you're
Oh,
powering,
Birmingham, sorry.
No,
No,
Thank
you're
you.
paying the
When you
9
build.
when you're expanding.
when you're building.
only
And-
when you're building.
Oh, yeah, because powering is only based on how much
Yes.
Right,
fuel
how much
you have.
fuel you have and the like. And one of the things that's kind of tricky is if I own Jacksonville and say Chris owns Birmingham, say everything around me. So I say I'm locked out in Jacksonville. I've got Jacksonville, but all around me is all done up. If Chris has Birmingham, I can actually power through him by paying the 9 to get to Birmingham and then the 6 to get to Memphis after that.
Yep.
So as long as I can pay the 15, I can jump Chris's position.
Yeah.
And one of my memories of playing this game from years ago is you were stuck up here in the Northeast and suddenly you made a reach for Kansas City and it cost you a fortune, but you were so bottled up here you had no choice. And all of us were like, oh my God, we had him in a corner and he just escaped.
Yeah. And if you'll notice, every section, too, has 2 cities that are side by side that have no connection cost.
Right, they're free because they're so close.
I believe that's a case in every one. This one
This
has
one,
3.
California doesn't.
3.
Down here.
Okay. So most of them have, or are just very inexpensive to
Right.
build to that next city.
So we're going to be a 5-player game today. So we're going to pick 5 sections of this map. Is that the rule?
Yes.
So we're going to leave one section out. One color is going to be left out. We'll be playing with 5/6 of the United States.
I vote for California as being left out.
The expensive part.
I vote for the Northeast.
Well, I don't vote for the Northeast because that's where I'm sitting.
Yeah, but the Northeast is
sitting in the
the farthest
Northwest.
away from us, so we're not going to be able to reach our
That's
cities
why I
over
was
there.
voting for California.
I figured. Lazy.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. Game time decision.
All right, then.
All right, so that answered my questions. I
That's the long and short of it.
couldn't remember how the powering part worked, but it's essentially you're buying your resources,
Yep.
and then you're burning the resources with the power plants that you've accumulated, and that's how many spaces you can power.
And the person who is currently sucking right now gets first dibs on the fuel, and the fuel gets more expensive as it gets used up. So if you're doing well, you're going to be last to get the fuel, which means you may be paying 8 instead of paying 6, or it may mean there's just not enough fuel there and you're stuck. If everybody else is in the same fuel source as you, fuel can run out, and then at that point you have no way to power your plants, and you go dark for a turn, and that can hurt a whole bunch.
Yeah, a couple things to note on that is you can't buy fuel for a power plant that you don't have.
Yes, right.
You can't buy plutonium, and you can't buy garbage if you don't have a plant that runs those. You can also, if you see like number 8 has 3 coal on it.
Yep.
You can put a max of 6 on there. So you can buy 6 of the coal to put it on there.
One set plus a reserve set.
Yeah. So you can go around where you're not having to buy fuel, which will typically happen towards the end of the game.
That was going to be my next question. Can you stockpile? Right. So if I have
Only double. One for that round and then one for the
So-
next round.
For example, this one could store 4 coal because it takes 2 to fuel.
Yeah, the number 10 could hold 4 coal. You would spend 2 coal to power 2 plants, and then you would still have 2 coal for the next turn if you...
Well, I mean, like, do I have to spend all the fuel I purchase in
No.
a turn?
No.
So I could just
Yep.
hold
you can
it
sit
in
it for the
reserve.
next turn.
You
Yes.
can hold it in
So
reserve.
that's what I mean by stock.
Yeah,
you-
so if you have
you
2 or 3
can't
coal
up
plants,
to
you
4.
might have 6 or 8 pieces of coal
Yeah.
because you can be storing for all 3. But
Right.
but it's nice to have you want to be in a factory, or not a factory, in a power plant that if nobody else is in garbage, then garbage stays relatively cheap because you're the only one doing it. If you're the only nuclear guy, then you can do okay doing nuclear because one nuclear actually can power a lot of cities. That
I think
comes
that
out
the
after a
minimum
few
is
turns.
4 with the nuclear, if not
Yeah.
5.
So in general, you just don't. If everybody's wrecking on oil or coal, and you can tell this was written by a German because I don't think they use oil for any electric production in the United States at all. It's almost all coal and natural gas. But regardless, if everybody's in coal, then suddenly the coal plants become beat. Nobody wants to auction on a coal plant because everybody has them, and you know you're going to be fighting for fuel. And suddenly garbage looks better, or oil looks better, and
Yeah,
nuclear looks
there
better.
will also be ones that come out there that are green energy. You have solar and you have wind, and then there's one that's a fusion plant, which comes out at the
very end. Yeah.
Yeah,
And those won't cost you any resources. They're just free
they don't
power.
typically
You know,
power as
the
much.
whole country.
Yeah. And they cost you a bundle because you don't have to pay fuel, so everybody wants them. All right, then. Sam, have you finished reading the rules?
Did you just discover something? I heard you go,
Oh, it was referencing a table the whole time, and I finally found the table.
on the back
it
of the
tells you
little
how much resources come out at the end of each round.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Also, Chris was correct about limiting the when you can build in the nodes. In what is it? Step 1.
phase 1.
It's step 1.
I understand. I'm telling you, it's phase 1.
Is that a power technology term?
I don't know what that is.
It's this game uses steps, and it's
There's 3 phases.
These
yeah,
rules are
the
screwed.
each round has, I think, 5 phases, and then you go through steps throughout the game.
Yeah. And-
Anyway, in the first phase of the game, each city can only have 1 house.
Right.
And then in the second one, you can have 2. In the third, you can have 3.
Right. And I will mention that on the back of that rule book, there's a section called
Important rules often forgotten.
Yeah, there is a rule in that section of that rule book in the early versions of this game where that's the only place it's mentioned. So something about burying a power plant. So
There's a power plant in the actual market. Or move it immediately. Draw it.
Yeah, Samuel should not face the mic and just read the rule book. I think that
Yeah,
would be
isn't it
I'm
true?
not just
Like
gonna
amazing
read
content.
if somebody has like 5 buildings, you don't have the number 5 out there anymore. It's like you don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you ever have a
Exceed.
plant in the market with a number equal to or lower than the number of cities of any single player, remove it immediately from the game.
that's the one.
It did mention that somewhere earlier.
Okay,
In the
may be a
market
new
phase.
rulebook. I know in my version of it, that was the only place it was mentioned. I'm like, oh, that's no wonder it's overlooked.
One of the things I love about this game is this little 2x2 card,
The cheat
card
sheet.
stock little cheat sheet. It goes through the turn order on one side, and the other side it talks about the money. Anybody's ever played Railroad Tycoon? It's got that feel to, as you build, you get more money, but as you keep on building, you're not going up as fast.
You get smaller returns at higher.
Yeah, from
Economies of scale.
Right.
your first
And
city
that's-
is worth 22. Your second is worth 33, which means you've gone up one less.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying that you start getting towards the end of the game, and it doesn't necessarily pay to be powering more and more cities, and you kind of gather up your resources for like one mad dash at the end of the game.
Yeah,
so
you
the
can-
timing of that mad dash with the other players doing the same thing is kind of important.
Yeah, going from 0 to your first city is an extra $12, but going from, say, your 14th to your 15th is only $5.
So turn order, number 1, determine your turn order. 2, buy power plant. Number 3, buy raw materials. 4, building. And 5, everybody loves bureaucracy.
All right, I think we're ready to get started.
I think we are.
Yeah, let's
Let's play Power Grid.
power this baby up and
Yeah, turn that power switch on, Sam. Let's go. 3 of my cities are subletting to Steven.
But they're still in your network.
Oh, you guys would have been
Not
tied.
anymore. They're in his network.
You guys would have been tied. It would have been a tie between you two.
It's just
Steven has more money.
Does he?
it's fine. I shouldn't care, but it's just like, why did you pick that? It just seems like an odd thing to do.
I think it's because you still get to purchase cities. So it's not the first to buy 15. If I bought up to 15 and Chris bought up to 16 and could power 16, he wins. So it's whoever can power the
Right.
most.
he's trying to do the Reiner Knizia thing of you need to
The
you need to
goofball
balance
ending.
everything that you do. So you got to balance your buying resources. You got to balance your buying power plants.
This actually kind of throws balance off. What it could allow you to do is say, I'm just going to buy 15 cities because I want to attend, even though everybody else only has 12. The guy who can power 11 turns out to be the winner because that's the person who can power the most cities.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the alternative to that?
The alternative is hey, whoever can power 15 cities first wins.
But there's no first. Right? What if we, in the same
Yeah.
turn,
Then you
we
go to
both
the-
power 15?
Well, what if in the same turn we both powered 15 with these rules? Then you go to the tiebreaker.
I
Yeah,
guess.
that's fair.
It's fine. It's just you're like, huh.
But isn't that what's actually being said?
It's like you thought more complicated than you had to. I don't know. As an engineer, I'm like you're always thinking, the simpler, the more elegant, the more better. I mean, you want things simple because when they're simple, there's less chance for gremlins to get into the system.
I mean,
This just seems to have some odd swings.
I think
to
you're
it.
right that these seem like more words to say the exact same thing.
Maybe it's
somebody
the
had
translation from German,
If somebody had reminded me about Fargo, I could have built up to 14 cities.
and you would have won the game because
Where are
of
you going to
Fargo, North
Fargo?
Dakota.
Fargo's right here. It would have cost me 21 instead of the 30 that I had to spend down there to go and donate.
It would've
It
cost
would
you
have cost you
15.
16, dude.
16. It would have cost me
15.
16.
Oh,
It
there's
would have cost
sixes.
me 16, which
Yeah.
would allow me to go up there to, what's that, Buffalo as well. I
You
could
could have shuffled off to Buffalo.
I could have done Buffalo and Fargo. So that was my bet.
Then we would have done another round.
It was
I
a
really wish
failure
that.
on
I
my
really
part.
wish that had
You
happened.
ended
though.
up in 4th place, Chris, which is
Stunning.
I don't know what to say.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not that we're angry; it's more that we're disappointed.
I'm sorry. Well, I blame Ed. So
and that's fair. That's fair.
I blame Samuel. He cheated somehow. There's all there
he
is to it.
was over there reaching in the money. He's not the banker. He was reaching in.
He
a
was
lot,
supposed
so.
to be
He did try to
$1
take
short
that
of what he
$50
wanted
from
to
me.
do,
Yeah.
and he wasn't. He had the exact
Oh.
amount of
He would
balance.
hand you a stack of cash and be like, "I need 6 back," and he would only actually be owed
only
4.
4 back.
And so that's how
There's
that's
that-
where
there's that $1.
like $2 here, $1 there.
Trust
Yeah.
and verify.
I can't believe you're accusing this honest man of cheating over a board game.
I'm sure it was an honest mistake.
Well, what else would he? Never mind. But yeah, so it's all in all, it's a very interesting game in the running gear. I mean, there are 3 specific mechanics that you have to manage, and we can hem and haw about the end game and all of that, but in the end, it's about building out your network and actually being able to power it.
Yeah, and those 3 pieces are all really entangled in each other.
Mm-hmm.
So the auction mechanic where if you're the player in first place right now, currently with the most cities or the highest power plant, if there's a tie, you get to run auction after auction until you take something. So you get to control that whole part of the game, and you can decide, I'm going to throw garbage power plants up there because I've got 2 good power plants already. So I can throw garbage and force people to deal with that. And you can, or you can grab ones that are just on the edge. You can have people pick fights.
You got to be careful though, because if you throw garbage out there, everyone else can just pass.
Yeah, but if you don't need it,
and then you're
you
stuck
can do
with
that.
garbage.
So instead, what you want to
Not
do is
garbage power plants.
You want power plants that run on garbage. But it may be like there's contention for coal, and you're not in coal. You say, okay, I'll put a coal power plant, and they'd all like to upgrade because they already have coal sitting on their cards, and then you can kind of start picking some battles.
If you read the table, you can set things up to put yourself in a position. Which I think is really neat, because you take a position that really is at a disadvantage, where you have to pick first. You lose a lot of opportunity there. But if you're clever enough, you can kind of swing things in a beneficial way and get other people to commit earlier than they'd like to.
The main problem I had, and that I have in games like this, is you have your money, and you have 3 specific things that you have to buy with your money. And it's all in 3 different phases, and it can all kind of change based on who goes before you.
Yeah, money, fuel, and power plants.
So, I might get $70, and I can look at the board and say, well, with $70, I can build 2 cities and buy the fuel that I need. Well, Samuel might buy some fuel before me, and then it's no longer viable. So then I have to go back and
your math doesn't work anymore. Yeah.
And then the same thing with the power plants. I can sit there and say, okay, this turn I have, if I do everything that I want to, I have $30 that I can spend on a power plant. And then you look at the power plants, and there's nothing that works for you except the one that costs 30. And then Chris bids you up to 40. And suddenly you're in a little bit of a bind, because there's just,
I felt like I was set up well for the next round. But
for the
a lot
next,
of us were.
Yeah, for the
I
next
was
round.
not. That's why I ended it.
Yeah.
If it had gone another round, I had all the fuel that I needed to power 16 cities, and I had enough. I would have gotten enough money to build 4 more.
And you were awful quiet the whole game, and I thought you were playing possum. And I think before we turned on the microphones, you said, "Oh no, I was struggling."
Oh no, I was struggling the whole time.
Yeah.
I never carried money over to the next round, where almost every round the 4 of you guys had at least $10 that you were taking into the next round.
Yeah,
A little bit.
I mean, there was at one point Chris probably had $140.
Wow.
You didn't build a whole turn.
Well, I never had that much
I did
money.
the same thing because I was sick and tired of being in second place because of this one stinking power plant I had. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to build houses, which is going to bump me way down in that turn order, which means you get firsties on fuel, so your costs are cheaper. Mm-hmm. Everything's cheap if you get to buy first, and you get to be first to get into towns. And I'm like, I need to have less towns than everybody else, because that's the only way I'm going to move that slot. And then suddenly I had lots of money left over. And so I went into that next turn really fat. And this turn just before the end here, you and I were doing the same thing. We're kind of dogging it, thinking, okay, I want $150, $180 in my pocket. I'm going to make a mad dash for the end. And it wasn't enough. I mean, I had enough power if I charged everything up, but I didn't have enough money to get the cities I needed to make it happen.
Well, I did that one round before where I didn't buy any cities at all.
Yeah.
And then I just ended up buying 5 cities. And that was part of it, is when you went out ahead, or you were at 11
I was
last
at
time,
11.
and you were able to buy 4 more.
Yeah, I went from 7 to 9 to 11 to 15, and that triggered the end game. And that was intentional, because I was looking at it, and I saw John kind of hang behind. I saw Chris, you hang behind, and I thought, they're kind of hanging back. They're going to build up, and they're going for a big push as they get closer to 15. I could hold on to my money too, or I could push for it and make a race. And it was a riskier strategy.
Yeah, and that tugs us along. We can't afford to get that far behind.
But it paid out, because it meant that I was able to end the game on my own tempo. I basically cashed out.
It was a good strategy, but I guess I was counting on you being $1 short.
I was very close to being $1 short, and you guys worked pretty hard to try and try and make me come up $1 short.
Yeah, the four of us all could have used an extra turn.
Yeah, I kind of hung my strategy on denying you that extra turn, because if we'd gone another round, I don't think it would have ended well for me. I did not have the power capacity to compete.
You didn't have the resources.
I didn't have I would have had to buy more fuel.
And
I would have had to
sevens would have
expand
come
my
up.
network, and it just wouldn't have been great.
Yeah,
So,
and power plants with the 7 would have come up. So somebody out there would have been able to power 18 or 19 cities.
Yeah, and I think they could have gotten there faster than I could have.
Yeah, I was set up. I didn't need to buy fuel next time. I could do 16.
Yeah.
And if I was able to get rid of my 3 and get a different one.
Yeah. I just looked at the fuel tempos, and I didn't need to buy, so I could power 14, and I just did the math.
So the game that you're always $1 short. You weren't.
You weren't. So, but we're all kind of dancing around the point here. It's like one of those, you watch the bicycle races in the Olympics where both bicyclists are riding at like half a mile an hour, eyeballing each other because somebody needs to make a run for it, and then the other, and they both want to have the favored position. And this isn't a game where you just make a mad dash at the end. I mean, it's you don't just take off and go for your best. I mean, you have to play everybody else's position because being in first place kind of sucks. In a bunch of ways. So,
yeah, it wasn't great, but I went to 11 because I eyeballed it, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I can afford 4.
Right, so you can take the loss on your fuel for a turn.
Yeah.
And at that point, you've got enough of a run going that you can get out ahead, and then you can coast across the finish
I was
line.
gambling.
Yeah.
As the person who was in first place for most of the game, I mean, as I was out on the West Coast where it costs a lot of money to go anywhere. But I didn't find it that disadvantageous to be in first place because I wasn't competing against anybody else. And I think once I purchased that relatively expensive green energy that powered 4 for free, that really allowed me to expand across the West and get over.
It saved on your fuel costs.
Organically, you kind of were best positioned to be in first,
to be on the West Coast,
because
Exactly.
you were isolated. You weren't competing in turn order for slots anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't need a lot of fuel because you were mostly green power, so you didn't really care that much.
Fitting for California.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, having that so early is probably what helped you catch up from having to pay for so much infrastructure on the West
Yeah.
Coast.
for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So it is interesting that you just kind of organically fell into a strategy where you didn't care that you were buying fuel last and buying cities last.
Yes, I was annoyed for like the first turn when I'm like, what the hell am I going to do out here? But then that 4.
Yeah, your first 2 or 3 cities are relatively cheap, but then you've got a couple of expensive ones. But then at that point, you're kind of out in the middle of the country again, and you're wrestling with the rest of us too.
Yeah,
And
so anybody
and
who's out in California playing this game needs to go green.
yeah, and by the time you hit step 2, just as you started hitting any opponents at all, and I don't think you don't have any.
There's one guy in a 3 city, and he left the city open back.
He left the city open. It's one guy in a 3 city, but he was the 2 city. Excuse me, he was the 3 guy.
Yeah, he was the 3 guy.
So you paid for 1 3 city.
Frankly, I don't think you would have expanded there if you weren't actively trying to block me off.
No, I would have gone to New Orleans.
Yeah,
Which would have been cheaper.
but you were trying to prevent me from getting the 15th city.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it was unfortunate that I couldn't do more too.
I was hoping you would be stuck like that.
I was looking at it. I was $2 short of doing Detroit, which would have, I think. No, you were already in Detroit, so that wouldn't have done anything.
No, I went into.
He had too many outs.
I
had
had
outs
a
down
lot of
here.
outs.
We didn't have
I was-
a place to stop him, and that's okay.
I was very well enmeshed.
Yeah, and he, because he got Miami on the cheap at the very end, he just ran down the East Coast before anybody else could get in there. And
I
get
did.
as
You
much
kinda
of it.
see-
on the East Coast.
I mean, we all we spread out pretty good out there, but California just got completely left alone.
Well, it's so expensive.
It is so expensive, and it doesn't. I don't like that about this.
Frankly,
board
the
game.
map doesn't
It just-
feel balanced.
It doesn't feel balanced at
So-
all. Northeast. I mean, it's also with like Railroad Tycoon. If those cities so close to each other, there's not a lot of cost.
But in theory, there's more contention. And,
Right,
and,
in
and
practice.
in this game, the more contention means you're paying 5 more. Out west, you might be paying 18
more
to make a connection.
Right, but in practice,
18 on top of the 15.
In hindsight, I should have pushed up against him more so than I
Yeah.
came. I tried to kind of get my area going, and I made my home up in the upper northwest of.
Well, you would have run into Steven before you ran into me.
So when we play this game again in say 2035, we'll play on the German map, and things are a little bit more evenly
Balanced.
spread out on everything, which we can't look at right now because we still have all our pieces on.
But yeah, the East Coast definitely felt much nicer to expand along than the Midwest or the West Coast.
Yeah.
Anything with like a 10 connection, I don't think I paid for that ever. It's just yikes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at 4 cities over there, and it's 3, 3, 5.
Oh yeah.
Well, he's got,
And
he's
another
got a
3.
stack that
Yeah,
don't
and-
even have a
Yeah.
transfer.
Yeah, there's 4 that don't have a transfer cost, and I am in all of them.
Yeah.
1, 2.
Those are the 4 cities, John.
Oh, 4 cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, 4 cities, and
Yeah.
I'm in each of those 4 cities,
Yeah.
which is
And the cost down through Florida and all through here is pretty cheap.
yeah,
too.
it's affordable.
Yeah.
It's affordable.
Yeah, so that's why I was perfectly. I started down in the southeast, and I was perfectly happy with that because there's room, and I just started
Frankly-
expanding north and west first, and then came back down. Unfortunately, I kind of because of that turn order, I missed spots in the middle that would have been really advantageous for me, and then I had so I ended
Yeah,
up
frankly,
filling that up
John,
before
I
had to.
expected you to go up north just as I went down south.
Yeah, and then Chris came in and beat me to it again because of turn order, and so much of this game is intentionally dogging it so that you get firsties instead of somebody else. So you don't want to be far away, you don't want to be really last, but you want to be last-ish so that you get options ahead of other people.
You want to try and be within striking distance of,
Yep.
of the lead.
Yep.
But you want to stay with the pack.
Right. So when you've got 5 experienced players all doing that at once, and you're all kind of eyeballing each other, and you're all dragging your feet, it kind of gets, one improperly purchased power plant could just snooker you for 4 or 5 turns because that's the tiebreaker.
And frankly, I think the game works really well there because of how dynamic the cost for everything is. You touched on that earlier, Stephen, with the money. But you really don't know how much anything is going to cost until it actually is your turn. Like with a power plant, it's an auction. You're probably going to you're not going to pay more than like 5 for a power plant unless you really want it, but that 5 could be important. And then the way fuel gets more expensive, the more of that fuel is purchased.
Yeah, the demand
Again, based on turn order.
Yeah, the way he designed the resource demand, I find to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that's really,
If
well
you
done.
ask me, I think that's the most interesting part of the game.
I
Yeah.
agree.
I agree.
Yeah.
And the way that the resources come out are refreshed every round based on what phase of the game you're in. That makes it a little more dynamic too, because in the beginning phases of the game, you're gonna favor one type of resource more than another, and then as the game goes along, you kind of morph along with it to kind of keep up with the efficiency of the resources to power, and it's like you never just start with a coal plant and end with a coal plant.
Yeah,
you can. It's not the most efficient.
Well, yeah, and
but,
there's
yeah.
coal clean to the end of this game, and I'm sitting there thinking, why has he not built version 2 of this game that is more, we're going through this global changeover into carbonless power. It seems to me this game is just begging for a redesign of its setting elements, where get coal out of the picture, get oil out of the. And oil doesn't make sense for North America anyway, but I suppose maybe it does in Europe.
If you did like a present power or present version, but this is timeless.
Did you say coal doesn't make sense in North America?
No,
said
oil
oil.
doesn't
Oil
make sense
doesn't.
in
Oil,
North
yeah.
America. Yeah, coal makes plenty of sense. in
I'm
North
not
America.
sure that would work as well if the whole push is to get to renewables and off of consumables.
Yeah, but in this game, you never get off of renewables.
well, in this game, you never get off of consumables.
Or, excuse me, you never get right. You never
Right,
get
so
onto
you have
renewables.
the 4 resources, and as they get scarce, you pay more for them. So you kind of naturally, a market forms where you're competing for.
I'm
the
just
fuel
thinking they could change this to a cost to build sort of. You could be in solar, you could be in wind, you could be in hydro.
I don't
you
think
could
cost
be-
as build works though. The whole point of it is you need to fuel your plant. So
Or-
sure,
It could be
my
a different
nuclear
game.
plant's effective, but maybe coal's cheap. So now I go into coal.
Unless you have a payoff schedule for each kind of power that you have to create. And then
John, this is a game you need to design.
This is a different game.
Yeah, it's a totally different game. This game did play different
totally
from most
game,
games
but
where
I think it's similar.
a lot of the renewable energy came out early.
Yeah.
So it did
we
not
had
put the
high number
pressure.
plants come out early.
Yeah, it did not put the pressure on the consumables. The oil being all the way down to 1.
Yeah,
and the coal
really
being
till the
down
end of the
to 1.
game.
Yeah.
Well, I also think we all kind of specialized in different things. So we weren't all
Yeah, we had a
competing
nice,
over...
We had a nice blend.
There was a nice mix. We weren't all competing over the same resources. I know there have been games where like 3 people go into garbage.
And it's gone. Or
And it's
coal is
gone. And
yeah.
I think Ed was the only one that did garbage this game. And I think...
For an extended period of time.
Yeah,
I did
Chris
for a little
dabbled in
bit.
it for a
Yeah,
little
and I
while.
was in it at the very
I
end.
think that was intentional, though.
Yeah.
I think we were just looking at the market and going, if I specialize in this, there's less competition.
Yeah.
So we didn't feel that pressure, but I think it still impacted the game.
Yeah, I'm just saying it. In previous games, there's been more competition for particular resources.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to depend on what comes out of the market.
Because
right?
I can recall games where nuclear, we would run out of uranium or plutonium or whatever the
nuclear resource.
Yeah, nuclear
it's
resources.
And I remember a game where I just crashed and burned because there was just no coal left on the board.
Yeah.
And for
I
2
remember
turns, I
those,
simply
yeah.
could not power.
Yeah.
And that's how it goes.
Well, that's if the power plants that come up are all for coal or nuclear or
Yep,
whatever, then
and-
people are going to buy it
and
because they have no
you
choice.
screw up and put yourself last in that turn order, then at that point you're going to pay a bill.
I definitely remember games where I've sat and watched people buy up the uranium and gone, crap.
Sucks to be me.
So anyway, we played the U.S. map because it's familiar to us. And, as we've kind of mentioned, there are favored zones. So the East Coast zone and the Southeast zone are highly favored over, say, the West Coast and the Northwest. I wonder how different this game would be on a map that's more quote-unquote balanced.
Or uniform.
Or uniform, even.
Yeah.
Because, looking at Las Vegas to, what is this, Santa Fe,
I can't believe it's 27.
it's 27 to go from
the
one to the other.
And somewhere on this map there's a place where it's cheaper to go through 2 legs instead of the 1, and I can't remember where it was, but somebody pointed that out.
Is it through the Northwest that we blacked out? Is it cheaper to get in there?
Yeah,
if you go through there?
there's one that it's cheaper to go with
Maybe a
2
little bit.
spaces than the other one, and I don't
there's
recall
a
what
bunch
it
of
is.
places coming out of Santa Fe, right? So I went Oakland. I went from Santa Fe to Oklahoma City to Dallas, and that was cheaper than going that way.
And that's
an 8
that's
cost
sort of
down there, I
that gives the map a little bit of chunkiness, so that's fine.
Yeah, it's a little rough. I like how the different costs kind of give a sense of terrain to the board where you're actually looking at it and evaluating, okay, this is a favored position, this is not. If I go here, I'm competing. If I go here, I'm not competing. That's interesting, but I'm not sure they hit the sweet spot.
And we did read that right where everybody starts in a different region.
Yeah.
Everyone has to start
Because I'm
in a
thinking
different
that
color.
we don't normally play that way, but maybe I'm wrong.
I mean, I'll read the rule again if I can find
Because that made it so that you had the whole Northeast. You were the first person. You took the Northeast, which had the cheapest spreadability.
Place the board in the
What
middle
was
of the
out
table, choose the side you wish to play on, separate into areas. In each game, the players choose
that's
which areas
normal.
they'll play in. We recommend 1 area per player.
Recommend.
The areas chosen must be adjacent during the
So
game.
you didn't have to be in California.
Every player
I'm
can
happy
play
with
in
that. I
all the
got
chosen
second.
areas.
Must have missed that rule.
Very convenient, Sam.
So is this game officially under formal protest?
Who
It's got an asterisk next to
who
it.
is surprised? let's just go ahead.
I'm just going to stop reading the rules. All you guys do is moan.
You just
I
omit
think
stuff.
that's physically impossible.
Yeah.
There is a freebie too. Cheyenne to Denver is a freebie. So yeah, there's spots that are freebies on the map, and then there's spots that are oddly expensive, and you're not exactly sure why. But that's how it goes. I mean, obviously,
Well, isn't Las Vegas actually in the middle of nowhere?
you're making the game work. Yeah, but it's got a huge empty lake next to it that they use for Hydra.
And burying bodies.
And for
Aren't they
making
running
people
out of
go away
water?
forever.
And don't they keep discovering bodies?
That's
as it dries up?
that's
joke.
the empty lake.
Yeah.
Is it completely empty now? Or
No, actually, it's they've had big rains out there, and it's growing at like 13 inches a day or
Nice.
something. So, well, it's not going to last. But take what you can get. So, all right. So, very old game. The only real luck part of this is the order the power plants come up in.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, like I said at the top, it's a Euro-ass Euro.
Yeah, it is, and its art is kind of reminiscent of the mid 2000s sort of game as well. So
Very Settler of Catan vibes.
I like the colors.
colors, maples.
I mean, it's not a drab board.
no,
It's
just
a little muted. It's not like bright and in your face.
Kind of cartoonish.
I mean, yeah, with the pipelines and everything. I like this form. I like this style
I like
of
it.
art.
It's enjoyable.
It's pretty evocative,
I think my only complaint is that the resources for uranium and trash are the same color as the yellow and red players.
now, all right. So maybe it's somebody else's copy that we have, but weren't the uraniums like
yes,
real
very
skinny tunes?
thin cylinders. These are hexes. So this must be a later printing. I think my original copy, they were very thin and tended to fall over. So and the other thing I'll point out is your little cheat sheet that you get, which is the same size as the power plant cards, which obviously that way they could have one deck printed for all of them. The printing on this has gotten much, much smaller as my eyes have gotten worse over the last 10 or 15 years, and I can't read this even with my glasses
It is
on.
a little.
It's
fuzzy.
a little too small. So if you want to up your game, make copies of these and blow them up double size and print them out
So
for
I
your
thought
old
it-
friends when they're playing.
I thought it was the dryer that was making my clothes too small,
No,
and then I
It's just
thought
not-
it was the refrigerator.
So I think we're to the point where we do the thing with the BGG scale. Samuel, as we've discussed ad nauseum, has won the game. So,
Much to my regret.
oh yeah,
I'm sure you're
you will
very
regret
broken
it.
up.
I will say something nice about you during my rating.
Next time I'm going to sandbag.
No, you're not.
well, that's
Probably
the
not.
whole nature of the game is that you sandbag. That's sort of how you play Funkenschlag. I mean, you make sure that you're not in first place until the absolute very last turn.
Unless you're on the West Coast,
That's what. Well, yeah.
specializing in renewable energies.
That's when you decide you're.
That
in
at least
first
feels thematic.
It is. Yeah, I said that earlier. It was very appropriate for
So
California.
Sam, do the thing.
Do the thing.
Do the thing.
Do the thing. All right. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. I enjoy this. It's definitely not a light game. There's a lot you have to hold in your head with how much funding you have available and how much you're willing to commit to each part of the game. You have to buy fuel and expand your network of cities and buy new power plants and save for the next turn. You got to keep an eye on when you're going to end the game. There's a lot to juggle there. But it's rewarding to do so. And it really is a game where you can just sit down and plan everything out. Or just... Now Chris is shaking his head.
Hard pass.
Well-
Hard disagree.
Well, when you're saying that you can plan everything out, you have no idea where people are going to build to. You have no idea what power plant's going to be there or how much you're going to have to spend on it.
And how much fuel is going to be when it eventually gets to you.
There's a lot of fuzziness.
It's one of those ideas you
Yeah.
can have an idea. It's like, oh, if somebody doesn't go there, I'll take that route. And if I can get that power plant, I see there's this much fuel. But until it's your turn, you kind of have to you have to flow and be bendable.
I mean, you got to
flexible.
flow, but frankly, I had a plan that worked really well for me. And
Well, whoop-de.
I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. My plan was to go down the East Coast and, diversify my power
Yeah,
plants.
that was my
and-
plan too, but you got in my fucking way.
Yeah, you can have a grand strategy, but fundamentally you're making tactical decisions.
Yeah,
to deal
there
with
is
the
a
stuff
lot
that's
of
gonna come in.
tactical decisions,
Yeah.
but it's very fiddly with lots of money counting and doing math and
Yeah, the bank was actually
double-checking
pretty
things.
busy.
Oh, I
So-
can't imagine the bank not being busy.
Yeah.
There's so many transactions going on. So it's a little shocking to me, but I'm going to give this game a 7.
Nice. Very good.
Shocking.
All right. I believe it was Ed next.
Ed's in
Ed
second,
was in
yeah.
second
I think
place.
by virtue of having money.
Yes,
Yeah.
by virtue of having $50 that I was going to spend on power plants next time.
Which I think means you didn't try hard enough to block me.
Well, obviously, I could have bought like at least another city or two. But
He said if anybody was able to build up to 14, he would not have built 15.
I know, but I didn't think he was going to be able to do it. But anyway,
Well, no, Ed could only power 12.
Right.
So,
So I had no reason
it
to go
didn't
to-
matter if
So
he
you
bought
lied?
14. No.
Boy, there's all sorts of reasons we should maybe be upset with how this turned out.
Yeah, but he
I'm
would
just
have
happy
had.
we got a sigh.
But Ed
double,
would have had.
double
And to be
asterisk.
fair, Sam is like, next turn,
Right.
I can win. I can get 15, and this is how many. So he was real honest. He was real open about it.
But if anybody builds up
and
to
now
14,
everybody's chewing into him.
Yeah, so he could have bought up to that many cities, but he could only power 12.
Yeah,
whereas
but
everybody else could
if he
power
had
that
bought
many.
12 and then had $1 left over, he would have been the winner.
Well, or if
No, because I would have
'cause you
powered
would've-
14.
But
Yeah.
no, but if he had kept you at 14, then the game would not have
The
been.
game would
because
not have
and
been.
then
chances are
everything
he
would
might have
changed.
been able to buy something that would have
Yeah.
blocked you.
Because you had
Right.
exactly
Yes.
enough money, which means if he had cost you $1 more anywhere on the board,
Yes,
you would have
if
had
he
14
had
instead of
managed to,
15.
he could have blocked me with 2 more city purchases, and then the game would have got another round. And I
Yeah,
would have
he
lost.
could have got into Chicago.
Yeah,
and a
could
win
have, he could have
coming off
actually.
the East Coast and winning, getting into Chicago or Detroit would have been
Well, I
pretty
was in
impressive.
Chicago.
Yeah,
He already was in Detroit, so I would have had to I would have had to be down here to prevent him from getting
Yeah, if
Miami
you'd gone down into
or
Miami,
Cincinnati.
New Orleans or all of those. But
but good luck with
yeah.
that.
Wishes were fishes.
yes. Anyway, I was really impressed with this game. I thought it was very well done. One of the things that I really thought was impressive was it really drove home opportunity cost, right? Even in the bidding stages, you could look at the multiple different power plants that are out there and go, all right, well, I'd be paying 20 for that, but then it's going to cost me an extra 6 to fund it. So why wouldn't I just stop bidding on that and go for this one instead? That I think this is probably the game that has driven home or really been able to capture opportunity costs in a really intuitive way. That was just really impressive with all the dynamics working together, very nicely.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially with the auction where we were keeping an eye on the power plants. Like, ooh, if I buy this one, I don't get to see the next one.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you ended up with that big renewable power plant.
Yep. Yeah, you guys all just
Because we were all
Yeah, it
out,
fell
and
in
it
your
just
lap.
came up,
Yep.
and you went, of course.
I'll take that though. That was the benefit of being first out on the West
Yeah.
Coast there. I'm like, all right, 33, see who wants it. And no one did. Yeah, like I said earlier, I didn't actually find being on the West Coast to be that much of a disadvantage, despite my big power cost to do literally anything. But that's because
The distance
Big-
cost, yeah.
because of that. Well, but the not having to pay for 4 energy every single time just let me put all my money into expanding. So I didn't have to be in the energy market for several turns.
We're just not in the fuel market.
Right. So that just allowed me to save up money to buy more renewable energy. So yeah, no, I would give this. It's a very well lubricated game. I'd give it a 7 as well.
All right.
You're referencing oil there.
John, you were next.
It's funny. I looked at because I logged my games and I tapped on it. And I'm like, I think I've rated this game an 8 in the past, and at some point I eased it back to a 7. I think because you've heard me complaining. I mean, I like a game where you can step on the throttle real hard and go, and this is more of a positioning game, and but so it ends up landing at a 7 just because I think. Even though there's a great design here, and mechanically it's completely sound, and there's a lot of very interesting things that are all entangled up in each other, and that's good gaming, and that's how Euro is supposed to work. It's low luck, which everybody likes as well. I think if it was a little bit more my kind of game, I might go higher. But for me personally, this game is a solid 7. I had a good time tonight. Like I said, I haven't played in years and years. Came back to it and said, yeah, it's still got that magic. It's still going on. So it's a good 7.
All right. 4th place went to Chris, which is I'm still
Stunning.
in shock. Still shocked.
I'm sorry to let you down, Steven.
I mean, you know.
Maybe I'm off my game a little bit. But
It's my fault.
yeah, I blame Ed. So it was nice having you, Ed.
Well, thank you.
Don't let the door
Thought I
shut
could ruin
around.
it for you.
No. Hey, last time I played this, somebody did just as much as they could be in my face, in my space. And, that added a different challenge to it. But
I mean, we joked about it, but I don't think that happened this time.
no, we all pretty much stayed our own different place. We didn't, like you said, we all went for different resources. You really have to pay attention to the game state of this one, to where, who has what power plants, what fuel is out there, when do you need to buy it up? Because if there's two other people behind you and they have coal, you really got to pay attention to that. So
I know.
And I made a tactical decision to lay back at 7 instead of buying. I could have gotten up to 11 at that time. But I laid back so that I would be able to buy first the next time. But because I lost about $30 doing that, it cost me. So I was counting on there being one more turn.
I saw you do that, and I was like, I think now's the time to go for it.
Yeah, that
Especially
was definitely the
that
right time to
timing
do it.
of the end.
Yeah, especially like you said, looking at the coal cost, I was like, I can't afford to do too much if I buy fuel. So
I was hoping
gotta,
John would have pushed one or if you were going up to 9 or 10 cities, then it would have.
yeah, that might have done.
But I
it.
knew that I needed to be buying first in front of John because we were going to be competing for a lot of places.
Yeah.
So I would have, if I had built more cities, they would have been on the northeast coast. And that still would have kind of made it difficult. But the third phase came out, opened up the whole board. Yeah. And I think we were one turn into the third phase.
Yeah,
when the
it
game
really
ended.
was. If the third phase had been another card down.
Yeah. So, I mean, this game to me, it's always a bit of a diamond in the rough. I like to bring it out, shine it up, and play it. And so I give it a rock hard 7.
A well-lubricated rock hard 7, huh?
Shocking.
A lot of power.
All right, Steven.
So,
Take us out of this,
Come on, just
Steven.
power through this.
So, everything's been said. So, the rules for this are pretty straightforward.
As long as you don't read them in the rule book.
Once you've played it the one time, as long as you keep playing it fairly regularly, it's fine. There are Euro games out there that are far more complex than this and don't have nearly the complex layers that this game has within each other. So, we've said there's the three things that are all in tandem: the buying the power plants, the buying the cities, the buying the resources to power your plants. Like, all of that is just so intertwined and intermixed that I can't think of a game that does this to the degree that Power Grid does. So even though this came out in 2004 and it spent a long time on BGG at number 2, this isn't like, I understand what Chris means by a diamond in the rough, but this is a very popular game by a very prolific designer, and I think it deserves every bit of praise that it gets. And honestly, now that I know that Chris doesn't win every game, we
may have to come back to it.
I might be tempted to play this a little more often. And
unless he was punking us.
it was all a trap. So, with all of that, just came in last place, but I had a good time. Like, I was able to make some moves that may or may not have been apparent to the table, but in my mind, there were some master strokes that I made to put me in a good position to do things like in the proceeding turns, to further my position.
I mean, if we'd gone another round, I think any one of the four of you had a chance at winning.
If we had one more round, it would have been a much more dynamic.
That would have been a heck of a
end
finish.
game.
And I wouldn't have been in it.
You wouldn't have been a part of it. No.
Nope.
Yeah, I think any one of the four of us could have.
It would have made it very interesting. Yeah. I kind of wanted to play it out anyway, just to see what would have happened, but we're kind of running pressed on time, so we're going to call it at that. So with all that said, as a staple Euro game, This is as Euro gets. It's a 7. It's going to be a 7 all day long. It's going to be a 7 into eternity. This is just one of the best games that you can play. So go out and give it a shot.
Can I share one of my favorite memories about this game?
Yes.
That comes up every time we play it. We played this game on Bretzville
Welt, yeah, I don't know, it's German.
It's
And-
BSW.
BSW, right.
We played this game on that system, and we're playing it. We're buying power plants. We're, buying cities and stuff. And it's got these cute little sounds. But then when you have to buy that fourth factory or the fourth power plant, and you have to destroy one of the cities.
One of the power plants.
One of the power plants, sorry. Somebody had way too much fun with that. Because that was like 10 to 20 times louder than any other noise.
Yeah.
And it was just and I mean, John, you said you were sitting in bed with headphones on next to your wife and like threw them across the room. I mean,
it hurt.
All of
it
us.
was so much louder than everything else that it really hurt.
Yeah. So that's just I love Power Grid for
Little
that point.
things.
Yeah, this one is begging for a BGA implementation. No,
I'm
it's not.
surprised it's not on there, to be honest.
I don't know. I mean,
Somebody
this,
has to pick it up and do it.
Yeah,
I
this
don't-
one.
It's more or less all volunteer there. So I'd just be curious. I haven't looked on the BGG ratings. I mean, this was one of those games that was just it was in the top 10 forever. And of course, nowadays the BGG top 10 is it might be 18 months old for the oldest. I don't know if Twilight Struggle is still hanging on in there, but I mean, it's much more modern stuff. And this thing, if it came out today, I think it would look very different. But I think this rule set and these maps laid out the way they are, I think this could go toe to toe with a lot of the games that are out there today.
I don't think this would play well asynchronously.
Yeah, that was my concern.
Yeah,
the
the auction would be awful.
Kind of like Elgron, like not a good game to play online.
Yeah.
Especially async. Even playing El Grande real time, and even if you're, FaceTiming everybody or on Zoom or whatever, it's still just you lose a lot.
Yeah, I agree.
And I feel like this probably would suffer the same.
Yeah,
but
you can't eyeball somebody during an auction when you're all on a computer screen like you.
But I tell you what, when we played on Bretzville or whatever it is, when we played, we all had to be on there. There wasn't take your turn.
Yeah, I don't know what that
There
is.
was no mail
it
order.
was not asynchronous in Bretzville.
And so we all knew what was going on.
that's
Power
Power Grid.
Grid.
It's available. Go play it.
This is around. You can still buy this, and it's
There are probably a half dozen maps or more.
more
probably.
than that. Yep, more
So
than
probably
that. And
close to a dozen maps
and
at
there's
this
some
point.
People, there's homemade people. There's people in Korea that made a Korean map. There's people all over the world that made maps from their part of the world. So.
Yeah, so go out and play it. It's a real good one. So, I know we picked the U.S. map just for familiarity. Thank you. Mississippi Public Education.
Yeah, you'll get it in post.
Notably, there are no towns in Mississippi represented. Memphis and New Orleans would be the closest proximity.
It's also missing Baltimore and Annapolis. So
Just saying, Mississippi Public Education strikes again. John, Chris, Sam, Ed, and I thank you for joining us in conversation about Power Grid.
I think you meant to say Funkenschlag.
Funkenschlag. You can join us in conversation by visiting our website, gamesfromthecellar.com, where you can find links to our social media and Discord server. The Pick Our Play poll for June is closing on May 31st. Join us in Discord to vote on your game that you want us to play in June. We look forward to hearing from you.